Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for being here, and welcome to you folks out there in Fort Collins and environs. Thanks for spending some time with us tonight to meet our fire chief candidates. We do have 4 candidates with us tonight. They're from all over the country. We're really excited to have them here to get to know them better and share that information with you, the community. We did an earlier forum for our employees. The PFA Board of Directors will be doing interviews tomorrow night. And so we'll wear these guys out, I'm sure. So we have to acknowledge that this is an unusual way to do this. In normal times, we'd have a meet and greet. You'd come to the Lincoln Center. We'd have a chance to eat a cookie and shake a hand. But unfortunately, in COVID times, we're not able to do that. So this is the next best thing. And we hope that this works for the community to be able to at least get a chance to hear a little bit from the candidates. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to give the candidates a few minutes to introduce themselves and tell you where they're from, what their background is, and just a little bit about themselves so you can get a general idea. And then we're going to go through about 10 questions. Many of which were submitted in the last couple of days by community members. So we'll go through those questions. We're going to do this round robin. So that means that every candidate is going to respond to every question in turn. And we'll start with a different candidate on each question so that they all get a chance to be first in alternate. And then also, if you have questions, we do have on Zoom, we have the question and answer section open at the bottom of the page. You can enter a question and that'll be passed on. Also, the same thing is true on Facebook. If you have a question and you're watching live on Facebook Live, you'd certainly be able to do that as well. And we'll try and juggle those 2 technologies. If you have any questions and you can't get one of those to work, you can use the email public comment at poudre-fire.org. So you've really got 3 ways to ask questions. We'll also have posted in the media set or in the Q&A section a survey for community members to offer some comments back to the board of directors. That's who will be making this decision about who to hire for our next fire chief. And so you can look there on a link to click to a little survey monkey to answer a couple of questions on our candidates. So with that all being said, I think we're ready to start, and we're gonna go in alphabetical order. So we're gonna start with Chris Angermuller from Grand Junction.
Hi, thank you, everybody. My name is Chris Angermuller. I'm the Deputy Chief of Operations for the Grand Junction Fire Department currently. Tell you a little bit about myself. I started in the fire service in 1997 as a volunteer firefighter with the Overland Park Fire Department, which is a suburb of Kansas City. And I was a volunteer for about 7 years, trying to figure out if I wanted to do the fire service as a full-time career, and finally made that decision and transitioned in 2004 to being a full-time firefighter with Overland Park Fire Department, where I worked in one of the busiest stations in the state of Kansas. So I had a lot of experience running calls. Also, with my time with Overland Park, after about 10 years of being on the front line, I promoted training officer rather quickly. And it was my responsibility to deliver training not only to my department, but to the other departments within the county as well. During my time at Overland Park, I had the opportunity to serve in various capacities to help better the organization, including being part of the department's accreditation process and ISO compliance process. So as part of the team that was able to get them accredited and drop their ISO rating to a 1. So that was a pretty big deal, as that helped to draw commercial businesses into our area. So after my time at Overland Park in 2014, I went to the Kingman Fire Department in Arizona, where I was hired as a battalion chief of training and safety, where it was my duties there to oversee the accreditation process and ISO compliance as well, and work with the department to address firefighter mental health and physical health in order to provide a better environment for our staff. So as part of that, through the all those items that we had to accomplish in Kingman in my role as the battalion chief of training and safety, I assembled some pretty good committees and working groups to where we tackled all of these problems. And within 1 year of my time at Kingman, we were able to drop the ISO rating from a 4 to a 1 and also become internationally accredited, which was a huge accomplishment for our organization. And again, it improved the services that we provided to the community by holding us up to a higher standard. So I feel pretty honored to do that. And then also address the firefighter mental health and physical health and help to develop a peer support program and a more comprehensive physical fitness program for our firefighters to ensure that they had a longer career and less likely to be injured. During my time at Kingman, I was appointed as a peer assessor for the Center of Public Safety Excellence, where my job was to go out and look at fire departments that are potentially wanting to become accredited and provide feedback on whether or not they should be, and provide guidance on what they need to address to be a better organization. Then after my time in Kingman, I went to the Grand Junction Fire Department, where I was hired in as the Deputy Chief of Operations. And I had to tackle a few pretty critical issues within our organization as well. Again, the behavioral health, we worked with our peer team to try to address that, but I also had to address health concerns pertaining to cancer. And going back, I had to address that in Kingman as well, to where we did more thorough firefighter physicals, 1582 compliant, which is a standard for physicals, and made sure that we were looking at anything and everything we could catch early to try to help the firefighters fight off any potential cancer or any other health issues. Also with Grand Junction, I was appointed as co-chair for the Rocky Mountain Accreditation and Professional Credentialing Consortium, which I oversee the consortium for a 4-state region, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico, to where it's my job to help these departments become better departments and better prepared to go through the accreditation process and all around adopt a continuous improvement model. So I've had a lot of opportunities throughout my career, and I've been looked at and asked to speak at multiple conferences. And I'm viewed as a subject matter expert in the area of leadership, continuous improvement, strategic planning, and my favorite for being a true nerd is hazardous materials for chemistry. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you. Chief Bergsten, can you give us a little introduction, please?
Sure can. Good evening. Thank you to the community for listening tonight and sending your questions in for the participation. My name is Derek Bergsten. I'm Chief of the Rockford Fire Department, located in Rockford, Illinois, about 80 miles northwest of Chicago. We're the second largest fire department in Illinois next to Chicago. History started out a volunteer fire department. I've been on the Rockford Fire Department for just over 27 years now. I've been the chief for 12 years. Great department, very happy with everything that we've done. I'm very excited, got wonderful women and men that work there. What I see as the next step in my career is Poudre Fire Authority has been a department I've been keeping my eye on for the last 2 or 3 years. Very innovative, a lot of great opportunity out here. That's one thing that I wanted to apply for. That's the only department I've applied for. I'm very interested in coming to this area, to Colorado. Some things involved in locally, very engaged with all of our stakeholders in the community in the city of Rockford, with all of our hospitals, especially the past during the COVID epidemic that we've had, our health department, all of the school districts that we take part in. We're also involved with Transform Rockford, which is a movement that has some involvement with Colorado ties from Tom DeMint from Woodward Governor. Serve on a committee for them also, been able to do great work, really getting the community involved. And for them to show, part of it is a little selfish. We get to show what kind of services the fire service has to really reach out to our community. On the state level, serve on the 911 State Advisory Board, which dictates how funds are spent and 911 calls are handled appropriately. and on national level involved in NFPA writing the standard for 1221, which covers 911 call handling for standards that call centers use across the country. Also had the opportunity to take part in a national group setting the EMS Agenda 2050, which is setting the goal for EMS for the future for the next 30 years and what that looks like. So I had some great insight, worked with some great people across the country with that. As far as accreditation, very engaged. That's definitely one thing that a Poudre Fire Authority is. Incredible job, incredible services that they provide to the citizens. We are also accredited. We're coming up on our third round, something we take very seriously as far as justification for our services, and make sure that we track the data, that we're doing the best service that we can, and continue to ask ourselves, is there a way that we can do this better? And that's the mantra with continuous improvement. We provide an ambulance service, which responds a little over 20,000 calls a year for transports. We also have our ambulance service that's accredited. And then our repair facility for our fire shop is also accredited. Again, that's something that we're very focused on, is that we're doing the best that we can using the taxpayer monies as efficiently and effectively as possible by the services that we provide. Some of the unique qualifications that bring to Poudre Fire Authority is working with partnerships. Our community struggles with a lot of social issues, and we work together very closely to address some of those with some programs that we've been innovative in with community paramedics, mental health issues, addressing homelessness, and collaboration is a big one. The only way to accomplish a lot of the social issues that we're facing, every community across the United States, is to have that collaboration across the board with all the stakeholders, private, nonprofit, and public. And then solving difficult issues. We've had our share of difficult issues in Rockford with budget and a lot of socioeconomic issues, and really having that mindset that we're here to solve this and work together and to work as a team. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Very humbled to have the opportunity to be with these great candidates, and look forward to more questions.
Chief Schaefer?
Well, let me start off by saying thank you. I, as well, very thankful to make it to this part of the process and to be so accepted into the community. It has been a great experience. I started in the fire service in 1989. During my period in college, I worked for a fire department there, and this is my 30th year. I finished up my undergrad, worked for a fire department in the Kansas City metro area. Finished there, left for a short stint as a fire chief in the outside of St. Louis, kind of the outer rim of the suburbs, and then moved to the Pacific Northwest, finishing up my master's in 2000. And from that point on, my time in the Northwest, I've been an operations chief, an operations deputy chief, an assistant chief, and a fire chief, now going on 16 years. The community that I come from is so similar to the Poudre Fire Authority. It's eerie. It's the culture and the welcoming attitudes and the ability to adapt and accept change and try new ideas is really a bedrock here in the Poudre Fire Authority, and that is something that I'm very used to. Some of the things that I think I bring to the table in terms of attributes that I possess, I do still maintain a paramedic license, and I'm very involved at the IFC and National Association of EMTs level for pre-hospital care and medicine, as well as an International Association of Fire Chiefs Wildland Committee that oversees and writes doctrine and does research on wildland issues for North America, including up into Canada. So we're really uniquely established here in the wildland urban interface. Urban Fire Department really planted inside of a very complex yet a very unique situation that's changing almost daily. Brings a whole new set of challenges for the staff, for the firefighters, for the community to really talk about and to start planning for. I know a lot of that planning has already been done, but it's a continuous cycle, like the chief mentioned before. Every day is an opportunity to improve, and that's something that I truly do believe in, and I really do look forward to the opportunity.
Thank you, Chief Waldo.
Good evening. My name is Josh Wallow. I'm the fire chief in Bozeman, Montana. And like the other candidates, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your evening to learn a little bit more about us as we learn more about your community and what a great fire department you have here. It's great to see this many people in the community who are interested in the success of this organization. So thank you for your time this evening. Been in the fire service just a little over 20 years. I've worked in volunteer organizations, career organizations, spent a little time in the private sector for the federal side of the fire service. I've worked as a fire marshal. I've been a training officer. I've been in some kind of chief role for 12 of the 20 years I've been in the fire service. So I've got a lot of experience on the administrative side of things. Currently serve as a peer reviewer for the Center for Public Safety Excellence Commission on Professional Credentialing. I also serve as a contract instructor for the Center for Public Safety Excellence. I think it's a fantastic organization. It provides a bar to measure against that excellence that we're trying to achieve. Fantastic organization. Also serve as the program planning chair for the International Association of Fire Chiefs. That is the group that plans the education for your fire chiefs across the country when they attend every year at the annual conference. Successfully navigated 3 ISO audits. That's the Insurance Service Organization. All of those were successful with improvements in the ISO rating. So I think that's something that's very important to the commercial community. Been very successful with federal grants as well. I'm approaching roughly $750,000 I've been able to secure in federal funding throughout my career. Coming from Bozeman, I feel like there's a lot of similarities between Bozeman and Fort Collins. It's a very high growth community that is really exploding at the seams with some really high expectations. It's a university town. Montana State's located right in the heart of town, just as CSU is here in Fort Collins. So I think the growth, the expectations are very similar. And I think I bring a lot of experience with that in Bozeman that translates over here into Fort Collins. It's a fantastic department. The reputation speaks for itself. I've told everybody to this point, you don't go very many places in this country and talk about the Poudre Fire Authority and people know who you're talking about. And the same could be said for the city of Fort Collins. Just a fantastic place and a fantastic department. I'm happy to be here. Look forward to more questions.
Thanks, everybody. Next question. How do you envision the role of fire chief in the community you serve beyond that as the leader of the employees and the department operations? How have you fulfilled that role in the past? We're going to start with you, Chief Bergsten.
Sure, thank you. I view that the role of the fire chief in the community ought to be a couple things, that they're engaged with the community, they know what's going on with the community, they're looked at as a community leader, that they're involved, and the other ones that they're visible. I think all 4 of those criteria are essential. Once you make sure that your department's operating well and you have your great staff to take care of it, that the conduit is for that fire chief to be out and engage in the community, because a lot of things that you can learn from the community and a lot of relationships and organizations that you can work with that can benefit your organization. But again, not only improve your entire community overall. And I think fire departments play a major role in that, especially where you see the future of the fire services becoming more engaged in social services. And I think that that's one indicator of right now is how currently doing that right now, that feel that we're very well respected in the community. We get reached out to quite a bit for any time we have any major issues, or if there's committees or they want some input on things that are going on with the community, they come to the fire department and ask for input. Just for example, what we're dealing right now with COVID, the Winnebago County Health Department Director asked for our input from the fire department. We're responsible for emergency management. So we stepped right up and we're helping set up a National Guard vaccination center, staffing that with some of our employees to help run it, and then also managing the emergency operations center. And by doing that, people look to us to find answers to questions and solutions. And I think that works out very well for what we do, because most of everyone in the fire service is problem solvers. And I think definitely in our community, we're looked at that way. And that's something that would bring to the Fort Collins and Poudre Fire Authority, is that we would be looked at as a problem solver, and people would reach out when they want to get issues taken care of and have a good partner to work with.
Cheever?
So I think the fire chief needs, like you said, to be visible always on, representative of the values and the things that really are anchored in the community, reflect that in their actions and when they speak. And I think as much as possible, the chief should not only be available to the masses, but also be available to the minorities. Reach out to our vulnerable population, our at-risk population, those minorities that are in the community that may not have a voice. I think the fire chief needs to offer that connection and be that voice for those minority groups. That's where I found a lot of benefit in the last couple of years as fire chief, and I think that's I think oftentimes we neglect that. We neglect the opportunity to reach out and plug into all the diverse community members that are either organized or not so organized. Fire chief needs to understand that. They need to know more than just the districts and the map, but they need to know the people that live there. I think that's important.
So we've heard the word visible, and I think that's true. You're the face of the department for your community because you've got to be able to be approachable to help build those partnerships so that you can collaborate in a community like this where things are growing at such a rapid rate. No one should even attempt to conquer it all by themselves. And so having those partnerships with your civic groups, Chamber of Commerce, CSU, your local hospitals, you name it, it's super important to have that. And I think the fire chief is the person who has to be available to the community to answer questions. I think also to serve as an educator. Most people, if you look at it statistically, have never had a real interaction with the fire department. So they may truly not know what it is that their fire department does. So I think having that chief who can be out there to be, kind of the representative to explain to people what the services are provided, what you can do for them as projects come up in a community like this is super important if you're going to be a good collaborator in a community like this.
I think one of the things that Chief Schaefer brought up and Chief Wallow as well that's very important is obviously that visibility piece. That's very critical for any fire chief being out there in the public, but also that engaged and involved piece. I think in my eyes, the fire chief obviously doesn't just focus on the fire department, but once everything is set up here and running very smoothly, that there's good leadership team, he or she is out in the community, actually actively involved in organizations such as the Rotary, Elks organization, Catholic Charities, anything like that that provides a service in the community. And I've been very fortunate to be part of organizations like that, to where I have got that different perspective of the trouble that some of our community members are going through and the assistance that they're needing, to where we can come up with a plan to try to help them and understand their needs as far as emergency response. But you have to put yourself out there into those opportunities to be visible and help in the community. And I think that's crucial, not just somebody who comes into work, punches the clock 8 to 5, be active in the community, be out there, be at those charity events, participate in it. Don't just serve on the boards, but be actively out there helping.
Thank you. I just want to let you all, the candidates, know that we've got over 100 people out there in between Zoom and Facebook Live. So that's great. I'm so glad we've got so many people in attendance. I appreciate that. So our next question goes to Chief Schaefer first. PFA is working hard to develop responsive programs to better serve individuals at risk in the areas it serves. Some of the programs include addressing homelessness, access to health care, both physical and mental, and access to basic necessities. What experiences can you bring to our community in these areas?
Well, I think, like somebody mentioned, I think it may have been Josh, about, people's experience with the fire authority or with the fire department or with emergency service in general is probably pretty low. But there are also a lot of people out there that have an extensive experience. those that are vulnerable, those that are at risk from multiple medical problems or mental problems. And we experience that in my jurisdiction. We have a pretty significant amount of unhoused community members in our area. We took a little different spin. I think the logic, the traditional logic would be increase call volume, add more resources. Our community couldn't pay for that anymore. And it became very, very challenging for us to keep up with that call need, as well as meeting the needs of the emergencies that occurred simultaneously. So we implemented something called a CARES team. We staff essentially 13 to 16 social workers that are working within the operations division, the people actually delivering the service, to go out and develop eco maps around our customers or our community members that are at need, and provide them with services that they may not be able to get through the traditional system. We also staff something called a Hotspotters program, where we bring in about 30 or 50 different agencies in the community. We take those leaders that are able to case manage, we call them hotspotters, the people that use loyal customers that use services over and over and over, that may not have the option to get a different type of service, something more finite. So we're able to case manage them and get them to a good place and prevent any additional 911 calls. We staff a behavioral health unit that responds to specifically address mental health challenges, both on the emergency side and on the non-emergency side, oftentimes in the urban core, but other times in some of the nicest neighborhoods where you realize mental health doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter where you live, what you do, it is a disease and it can affect you. So, out of our 23 units on the street, only one of them is actually 24 units on the street. One of them is a behavioral health unit. I see that business to what we do expanding exponentially. We're seeing the need more and more and more every day. And we also work with and staff co-deployed teams across our city with our police department as well. So there's a lot of interaction, especially on the medical side with law enforcement. We do participate in and lead a homeless coalition. And then one unique issue that a lot of communities, I think, are coming to us and examining is this idea of community court to keep people that may be trespassed or maybe unhoused, not able to find a permanent location, but they, due to some kind of barrier, whether they have a criminal record or another type of a barrier that would preclude them from getting housing, we're able to work with community court to, regardless of what they're being charged with, as long as it's a misdemeanor, work with them and get them into some permanent housing or into a system or a plan to where they have accountability as citizens to be accountable for the charge, but also realizing that there may be a barrier to them being successful. So we have one dedicated judge that understands mental health, that understands comorbidities, that understands really what our community is having to deal with. And she's able to apply the justice system in a way not to penalize and jail everybody, but to work with us and give us a chance to be a part of that solution. So those are a couple things that we do. And that program or that arm of our agency and fire service in general is just going to become massive. The fires are never going to go away, but this need from our community is going to become massive, and we need to be able to be flexible, agile, and leverage the people, the talent that we have here to meet that need.
So I'll start with homelessness, and I'll go back to the previous question. It's about your partnerships and your collaboration. No one organization can tackle these issues by themselves. When I look at the city of Bozeman today, police, fire, our library, our Parks and Recs division, working with nonprofits within the community, because it takes all of us to really address this, because there is no single solution or single answer to the homelessness issue. And again, for us to think that one group is going to be able to handle that, it really puts too much of a burden on one group. But together, through partnerships, we're having some success. The other thing I think that's important to understand is that the way we're addressing either homelessness or even mental health has changed, and it's changing for the better in that the old way was just take people to the hospital and that was the end of it. And that's maybe not what that person needs. Maybe they need some social services. Maybe they need some behavioral health counseling. And so what we have now is we have these on-call behavioral health specialists that we can call out for situations that the person may not need to go to the hospital, but they certainly need some form of assistance. And so we leverage our partnerships to fill those gaps in situations where the traditional fire service probably is not the best avenue, but we do know how to fill it with some of our partners. Access to healthcare from the physical side, that's ever changing. And I think COVID, if there's maybe a silver lining, it's going to show us some more opportunities here. We're already looking at alternate delivery methods, being more proactive. When people have a situation where we know we're seeing this person routinely for some kind of medical situation, we try to spin that and look at it as how can we be proactive to make things better for this individual that maybe they don't need our services tomorrow or the next day, or maybe not for a long time, because sometimes they just need a little assistance at home. Maybe they need some assistance in how things are set up. And we've got those tools to be more proactive instead of waiting until things are in a situation where they've dialed 911. From the COVID standpoint, I think we're learning to use technology more to that. Maybe that's the next step in this access to healthcare, that you don't have to go to the doctor's office. You don't have to go to the hospital, but you can still have that facial interaction. It's maybe not face-to-face like most of us would like, but you still get an opportunity to talk to somebody, ask questions, get some assistance if needed. And maybe that's the next step. So I'm really curious to see if we can expand on that part of what we've had to adjust to or pivot with COVID. Maybe that is our silver lining. And then, the access to basic necessities was the last question here. I'm really proud of a program that we have within our department today, that our firefighters have the ability, if they're at a situation or a call where things just aren't going real well for somebody in the community that day, we have some avenues to make it just a little bit better. And it could be something as simple as a gift card to help with some expenses that maybe that person or that family just can't tackle at that time. And we've also have a culture that our people are empowered to pick the phone up while they're on scene and say, hey, I've got a situation it's not our everyday run-of-the-mill call that needs something different. And that's where we get to go back to our partnerships and leverage people to go, you know what, I don't know that we can personally fix that at the moment, but I know who does. And that's why it's important to have those partnerships and relationships if we're going to address, the homelessness, the access to healthcare, and the access to basic necessities.
I think Chief Wallow definitely brings up a great point when you talk about the collaboration piece. As a profession, we can't do this alone. Chief Schaefer also brought up the CARES program that they utilize. We have a similar program to where we've partnered with Colorado Mesa University in Junction to put in service a unit with a social work intern and typically a paramedic or EMT. And they go and address non-emergent calls to go to situations where maybe somebody needs to look at a mental health piece or be referred on for something pertaining to physical health. That's the job, is to be able to go there, identify what their needs are, and refer them to the proper agency that can get them the assistance they need, instead of just calling 911 and throwing them in an ambulance and going to the hospital. That doesn't help anything. So we have to have that collaboration in everything that we do, and realize that as things continue to get more complex in our profession, we're going to see that need for that collaboration to grow with more and more organizations within our community, not only at the local level, but at the county, state, and federal level, so that we can provide the best services possible for our citizens. The basic necessities, I mean, that's a huge one. And we have to be able to get the proper assistance to them instead of just shrugging them off. And I think that that's been a problem in our profession in the past, but quite honestly, the fire service has been getting better about addressing that. And I feel that there are great opportunities to build on what exists here within the PFA and make it even stronger.
So this topic is something that I truly enjoy and passionate about. Homelessness, 2017, we partnered with our human services and a couple other nonprofits to achieve zero homelessness for veterans. Now we're continuing to work on the rest of our homeless population, but it was done by taking one name on a list and focusing our resources to find out what they needed, why they were homeless, find out what kind of other support system they had, and then work on it as a group. Because like everyone said here, you can't do this by yourself. And for us to bring all those groups together, we would sit in a room like this every Monday and say, who are we going to work on this time? And we'd pick one or two names and we'd focus our resources and be very intentional. And we had great success. And we've continued that to work on the rest of our homeless population. Access to healthcare, both physical and mental. About 5 years ago, we piloted a mobile integrated health program, partnered with one of our local hospitals that we have a great relationship with that train all of our paramedics. They were on board right away. We transport roughly half of our patients to them, almost 10,000 on a yearly basis. And we call them friendly faces, the repeat users. And we knew there was a better way because we weren't improving their health. We continue to pick them up. So we partnered with them. We had a nurse, a paramedic, and a pharmacist. We'd go out to their home, sit in their home, find out what their needs are. Because we found there's a big disconnect. That what information they were telling the doctor in the hospital didn't match up to their home life. And a lot of people, they might have been embarrassed or just had some other challenges. And once we were in their home, we could find out what they needed and what we could help them with. And then also we would make sure we did a home safety survey, smoke alarms, CO alarms, to make sure there's anything that we could to make sure that they were safe. We do have a diverse population in Rockford. We have a large minority population and they have a lot of challenges. And this program, coming to their home, sitting down with them where they feel safe and secure and taking the time to talk to them, really moved the needle on keeping them out of the hospital and out of the 911 center. We've now expanded that to a trial program with mental health. We just applied for a grant program for $3 million to add 2 more community paramedics just to deal with mental health. We found out that most of the patients that we dealt with mobile integrated health had some type of underlying mental health issue, whether it's anxiety, depression, or some other challenges. So we're trying to match all that up, working with our stakeholders. And the basic necessities, what we found out, they didn't really need any medical help at home. They just needed some education on what resources were available to them with their insurance that they had, whether it's through the state or another program. So they had access to it and they could reach out and utilize that. And I think all of these efforts working together led us to get to an alternative transport program. In the state of Illinois, we're mandated. If someone calls 911, we have to take them to an emergency room. And we know most of these people did not. So now we have permission from the Illinois Department of Public Health to transport someone who has a mental health crisis to an alternative facility, not a hospital where they're better suited. And definitely that's worked out so much better for someone that's having a mental health crisis, not sitting in ED for hours, that they go to an appropriate facility with trained personnel. And then continue building on that. We applied for and were awarded an ET3 grant that we're going to look at. It's for emergency treat and transport for a 911 center. We'll incorporate a nurse into our 911 center to triage those calls and then find alternative means to address them rather than send an ambulance and a fire apparatus. So that's some of the experience that we've had, and I think those can translate to any community across the United States.
Thank you. We're getting some questions in on Facebook and Zoom, so I'm going to insert one of those questions in here for you. Do you have a vision for PFA to become an advanced life support department for those in the community? That means adding paramedics to our fire engines. So I want to pose that question to you all. That's one from out in the community.
So I'll tell you that I'm biased. I come from an organization where we have ALS capabilities. We have paramedics on the fire engines today. I think it's a great resource. We're in the business to provide service, to make sure that our citizens are taken care of, they're healthy, and that we make things better when we arrive. And if we can do that with our paramedics, I think it's fantastic. That being said, without understanding fully, the desires and the mission of PFA, there would need to be some conversation here to understand, where the department's at in terms of its working relationship with the ambulance service providers in the hospitals. But I would lean towards saying absolutely, it's probably the next step. If you look at EMS across the country, having those paramedics available off the fire engine, which is typically there first, is a great step. Now, that being said, it goes back to making sure we're sending the right resource to the right call. If we don't need to send the fire truck to some of these medical calls, then we shouldn't. But in the situations where we could send ALS and make a difference early, I think it's the right thing for the community.
I think as far as ALS goes in the future, I think it's definitely something that has to be kept on the radar for PFA. But I think when looking at that, I think it's very critical that work with our partners at UC Health on the ambulance transport side to evaluate, is it currently a need for the organization? And if we're having trouble getting ambulances to a call and our fire apparatus are getting there a lot faster than they are, then yes, it should be something that should be seriously considered. But it's one of those programs that is not easily or rapidly established. It takes some time. So now would be the time to look at that data and evaluate that and see, is this something that we need to do? And if we do need to do it, determine what that looks like. How is that program going to be set up? And what are we going to put in place to measure whether or not it's successful? So would that the ALS program here in PFA look like potentially 2 or 3 engines initially, and then evaluate that and see if that's a huge benefit to the community? And if it is, do we look at adding more and eventually have every apparatus have a firefighter paramedic? Potentially, yes, but we have to see what the data shows us and work with our partners at UC Health so that we're not trying to do this on our own. It's that collaboration piece that needs to be there in order for this to be successful in the future, if that's the route that we need to go down.
Advanced life support, definitely like Chief Wallow said, very supportive of this. I'm still a paramedic in the state of Illinois. I started out on the fire company in 1994, where we did not have ALS. I still remember numerous calls that we went on. We were waiting for an ambulance. We had limited capabilities. Since then, we now have advanced life support on all of our fire apparatus, who are the first ones to arrive on scene. They can begin that treatment, and everything comes down to time. Time is tissue, whether you're having a heart attack or a stroke. And for us to do life-saving measures with drug therapy or other treatments that were provided does have a great impact, and it's all about outcomes. And Poudre Fire Authority has the data through accreditation to evaluate, how many of those are, what kind of impacts, and especially working with your hospital partner. You get into identifying STEMI alerts in the field, someone having a heart attack or a stroke alert, to get them the appropriate facility. Because it really comes down to the citizens that we're serving to protect. Are you providing the best level of service that they want to expect and that they deserve from their fire department? I think one thing that we incorporated at the Rock Fire Department 11 years ago, we began a survivor event. And every one of those people that come to that survivor event was a result of having an ALS company. The ambulance played a big role in that, but having that fire company on scene first, the beginning, those life-saving measures had a direct impact on the outcome of those citizens being able to be there and come back and celebrate some life-altering, life-saving measures that were done by the crews that responded.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that's been said thus far. I do have a bias. I come from an all ALS system. I'm a huge proponent of offering the paramedic education and having the people as a professional development tool become paramedics and add that enhanced level of service. But I think the important part, especially as an incoming chief, is to be extremely pragmatic about, same thing with the social programs and everything else. I mean, everything has to be measured. There has to be a pragmatic approach to this. At the macro level, look at the whole continuum, the whole healthcare continuum, what it looks like for the majority of our patients, key performance indicators, track outcomes, and then model what ifs. What if you had a paramedic company in and these identified KPIs or key performance indicators, the clinical outcomes should really be the driver of the conversation. And if it's the right thing to do for the community, I think it's been mentioned already, the right resource at the right time is incredibly important. And it bites in again to the big system, the reliability of the system to be able to respond to those critical events. So I can't say yes or no. You know, in my heart, I would love to be able to do it, but it really relies on what the system needs and what benefits the most people.
Great, thank you. We're back to you, Chief. What have you done to increase diversity within your department?
So this is a topic that we tackled in Grand Junction last year and took pretty serious. As command staff and senior staff, we took a look at this and decided we wanted to try something that was viewed as outside the box thinking, innovative approach to trying to be a more diverse and inclusive organization. And so what we did is we used to have the requirement of you had to have your EMT in order to get hired with Grand Junction Fire, even to apply. So we went ahead and eliminated that requirement and put into place that we want to hire people, for who they are. So what we did is we put that process through without the requirement for the EMT certification. And then we were able to hire 7 outstanding employees. And then from day one, when we hired them, we started paying them as firefighter EMTs, and we put them through a SLAM EMT class, is what easiest way to say it, 30-day EMT program, where all 7 of them passed with a very high score and were very successful. And ultimately were put on ambulances, and they're going through the fire academy right now, and they'll be on fire apparatus. But the people that we hired came from a pretty diverse background. We hired some military veterans, female, Latino. So these people that we hired would not have had the opportunity to come into the fire service because they were working 2 or 3 jobs. They were trying to support their family. They didn't have the opportunity to take time off to go to school to get their EMT, which is a requirement to get hired. So ultimately, this was their gateway into the profession. And these 7 employees are rock stars in our organization. In fact, our organization, the nickname they have for them is the Magnificent 7 because of how well they've performed. And as a fire chief, I have to be able to look at those alternatives and look at the outside of the box ways to increase our diversity and inclusiveness in the community and take this method out to some of our lower income areas and try to recruit there and try to get a more diverse background on the PFA. You look at the organization as a whole right now, 91% male, 9% female. That's pretty common, I think, across our profession. And I think we need to be better about trying to close that gap and make it more equal, as well as more ethnically diverse. And that's a huge priority for me as a chief officer.
This is one thing I feel very passionate about. When I was getting my master's, this is one thing I did my capstone paper on, was the recruitment and diversity of our organization, which we've been talking about it since I was hired in '94 and never really were able to move the needle much. It was one of my initiatives first getting the position of fire chief. Wanted to talk with the mayor and the city council to find out if they were really serious about it. They were. The first thing to start out, we hired a recruiter, someone that was dedicated to focus on recruitment and developing those relationships and collaborations within the community. And that really garnered us a lot of support with religious groups, with educational facilities, schools, grade schools and middle schools. And I think that really got us started. And it's very important for this program, especially to have those relationships. We're a very diverse community, and we really wanted to target City of Rockford residents to help out our own community. When we do a testing cycle, we'll have about 800 applicants, and probably 90% of them aren't from within the city. Most of them have fire experience or they're a paramedic. And just like Chief said here, we did not make that a requirement. We wanted to give all of our citizens in the City of Rockford a level playing field. So went to our elected officials, asked them if they would support passing, given 5 extra points to anyone who applied from the city of Rockford to justify residency, and they did. And over the last 5 years, we've really been able to improve our level of diversity within the organization, especially from the city of Rockford. Part of that collaboration, which I see what happened here, is we went out to the community colleges, the university, and targeted a lot of the sports teams because anyone in the fire service likes to work as a team. And it was a very good connection. And we especially focused on the women's sports teams, and we got a lot of support and interest from that group. So I think it's very important that you have that collaboration and develop those relationships, which we've had, and to really improve to get people to apply. But then once they apply and you get hired, you want to make sure they have a sense of belonging. The first step is to get them recruited, and then you want them to stay there and feel like they have a voice. And I think that's one thing we've really worked hard on the last 5 years, is that they feel that they have input in the organization, that their voice is heard regardless of who it is, and that we listen to them. And I think that's really worked out well for our organization, especially our command staff had one of our most diverse command staffs in the history of the organization. And it really shows that anybody can attain any level within the fire department. And that belonging is a big piece that we continue to work on and really get that message out to the community.
So I think it really does start at the top. The fire chief needs to make that goal a priority for the organization. You have to develop an inclusive culture, an accepting culture, and a culture that really celebrates the differences in people. With the 2 generations or 3 generations that are in the fire service right now, serving, you could have you can have vast different backgrounds with these different generations, but one thing that is all equals, they're all human beings, and it's our job to set that culture and build upon the idea that diversity and inclusiveness and people with different experiences, different cultural backgrounds adds to the effectiveness of the organization. Some of the things that we've done, we in our organization, we recruit nationally. We don't have any geographical limitations. We've hired from Canada. We had a professional women's basketball player in Iceland. We look everywhere for candidates, and then in lieu of having our own physical agility, we adopted something called the CPAT, which is a national standard. And that really did decrease what I would consider a barrier to entry from our previous test, our previous exam. So we really did, we took the best practices in the industry, took an athletic mindset, and really focused at hiring for behaviors instead of certifications. I think the last thing I'd mention too is that we do have specific hiring for laterals. One of the probably most beneficial programs that we've had in the last 20 years has been the opportunity to bring seasoned firefighters from around the country, including people that may be deployed in the DoD with experience, and bring into our organization, modified academy, and then tied to a mentor. When you bring people in that have similar experience from different places in the United States into your organization, it really does add a level of professionalism and a different flavor inside the organization. So we've used that as a tool to kind of spur some of the equitable issues that we had internally, and that's helped out pretty immensely. I think I mentioned the mentor as well, as we assign a mentor to all the new recruits to kind of help lead them through the process of onboarding and introducing them to our culture and bringing them into our family.
So for us in Bozeman, it starts with a change in our recruitment practices. Traditionally, the fire service doesn't have a recruitment problem. The problem is that all the recruits tend to look the same. And when we're trying to make an organization that's more reflective of our community, we've got to change how we go about recruiting people to get a more diverse pool. The second part of that is we have to change some of our hiring practices. We used to require people who wanted to apply for our department to take a specific test that was only given once a year in a city in Montana that would rotate. Well, if you're trying to diversify, you're putting up a lot of barriers right there. We had to eliminate. So more targeted recruitment. You've heard some great examples here of starting early. For us, success has come when you start talking to kids as they're freshmen and sophomores in high school, trying to figure out what they want to do. And quite honestly, the fire service may not even be on their radar until you put it on their radar. So having that targeted recruitment, we do the same things with Montana State, looking at their students up there, people who may have never thought about the fire service until we came to them instead of the traditional way of waiting on people to come to us. Once you get the people in, it's important to make sure that you understand, and this is something that I've seen departments struggle with, and we've even had our moments in my departments where we're so used to hiring people who come from a certain background, and most of those people have a fire service background, that we don't understand why they don't have this base level of fire service knowledge. And that's why having a mentor is so important to help them close that gap much faster. If it's somebody who never thought about the fire service until we showed up and asked them one day, hey, have you ever thought about joining the fire department? They may not have that background and that depth of knowledge as some of the other candidates. So the mentor helps them really close that gap a lot faster. We've been very successful in Bozeman. We hired the first female in the department's history in 2016. So that was 132 years that we broke that barrier. And since we've continued to move forward to today, 10% of our workforce is diverse. Is that a great number? No, but it's a heck of a start from zero where we were as recent as 2015. So we're making strides in a community that quite honestly doesn't have a lot of diversity. So I think we are setting the example for our community and how to do it and what diversity looks like. And then we're setting a culture that's accepting of it, because I think that's extremely important, because again, we're a community leader that a lot of other folks are looking to set the example. And I think we're doing a really good job of it.
Thank you. So we're going to come to you, Chief Bergsten. We've had a couple of questions, one before the meeting and one during this meeting, asking about COVID. Of course, that's on everybody's mind. So can you talk us through your response to the pandemic for both your community and your employees? But also, can you tell us what important attributes you think there are for firefighters during the COVID response? What do you think what qualities do you think are important for our firefighters in making a good response during that time?
Sure. So first one, I'll focus on the employees. When we keep an eye on things, seeing what's happening, we knew it was going to be something that we had to be prepared for. So we want to make sure that our members were taken care of, what they're coming to. Like I said, we do the ambulance transport. So roughly about 70 transports a day they're dealing with. We want to make sure they had, first of all, the proper protective equipment to wear. That was an issue across the United States. Our staff worked early on getting the supplies in before a lot of people had challenges with that. So we never ran out of PPE the entire time, doing very well. The other was, what do we do for our members if they've been exposed? Because at that time, early March, April, a lot of anxiety going on, especially they didn't feel comfortable about going home to their family members because the hospital would call us. We had a good reporting system that, hey, this patient has tested positive for COVID. So we had to have a process in place. We worked with the union to make sure that we had a process that everybody understood that was fair. Our city was very supportive. We provided alternative housing if they didn't want to go home or if they had someone that was compromised immunity. We also provided sick time to cover them. It didn't come out of their own sick bank. We had a COVID sick bank, and made sure that we provide them whatever resources. And then the biggest one as it developed was testing, the availability of testing, just to rule it out. If someone had been exposed, nobody wanted a quarantine for 14 days because, that impending loom of, am I going to get sick? So we worked with a local medical clinic in town that has a wide chain, about 70 places throughout Northern Illinois. And they had the Abbott rapid molecular tests. And we worked out an agreement with them that we could get our members in and get tested right away. And that was incredible. That took a lot of anxiety. They can go get tested, find out in 15 minutes. And that really benefited, everyone's well-being. And then as far as the attributes of firefighters responding, like to calls, you mean, or, okay. So I think that really puts them in a better place knowing that they have these safeguards in place. It is very demanding. We implemented some protocols for a 911 center that we'd ask people to come outside, try to minimize exposure. We purchased decontamination equipment. So make sure they had everything they needed and safeguards in the stations. And I think just to know that things were being done, nothing goes as fast as everybody wants to, but processes were in place to make sure they had all the protection of the equipment, able to decontaminate the rig, the station. That worked out really well to keep them peace of mind to focus on serving the citizens and whatever medical ailment there was. Just information to make sure that information flowed back and forth. Because when you're transporting 60, 70 patients a day, we got a lot of emails from hospitals, people that were coming up positive or they were symptomatic and the test hadn't come back yet. So we need to have a process in place to get that information out to the members so they didn't expose anyone at home, whether they had a family and a parent staying with them or their wife or spouse was pregnant, just to have all that information in place. So I think that's one thing that really helped the firefighters respond, take their mind off that. Hey, I'm okay. I have the protection. Big things, education, so much that we didn't know about. CDC guidelines were changing on a constant basis. And what are the facts, and made sure that we updated that on a regular basis. And it was very trying. None of us have been through that before. So there really was no right way. It was just to make sure that you communicate and get all the information out that you can. As far as the community, one thing about a year earlier, we took over emergency management for the entire county. Just because of how well we have been doing in the city, the sheriff asked if the city fire department would take it over for the whole county. So this was quite a test of us starting something new. Worked out very well. Started our emergency operations center in March. It's been running ever since then. Especially now what we're doing, partnering with the health department. The health department director called and said, hey, would you help us? We need to get a vaccination site set up. The National Guard's coming in 6 days. So that's a very short time frame. They're bringing 90 members. And if you don't have a spot in 6 days, you're going to go to the next community. So we took that challenge, got a hold of a lot of stakeholders within the community, making a lot of calls, a state's attorney developing lease agreements. And we're able in 6 days, pulled off a lease agreement, secured a facility, and our emergency operations center was helping the National Guard set up. After that, they actually brought in the U.S. Forest Service incident management team just to take a walk through and see what we had done because they wanted to duplicate that. So we're very engaged this whole process with the community and especially partnering with all 3 hospitals that we have. We have regular phone calls with them that as far as being policymakers that I kind of orchestrate with all the hospital systems twice a week and then with all the elected officials for our entire county to make sure they have the information because all this changes so rapidly and to get all the information, the correct information out at the same time. So that's what we've done with the pandemic for our employees and the community.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time, I think, for the fire service across the country, regardless, paid volunteer, career, metro, whatever. I think I was in a unique situation with COVID because it landed in our state first. And, a crisis is really a race between time and knowledge. And we were struggling with both. A lot of the information was contradictory to what we were reading from multiple qualified sources. So incident command is second nature to us. So we went ahead and stood up a team to staff our fire operations center. And that team operated on a 12-hour and then eventually on a 24-hour rotation to where we managed developing logistical supply chains to support the employees with safe PPE and safe equipment, all the way to some of the AOS and some of the advanced life system equipment we needed to change to be able to meet the need for this specific pandemic. So we modified that. We modified a number of procedures. The training and the education was so important to the membership of the organization because we couldn't have our people do the work that they do unless they were healthy. And if you look again from the macro level, a firefighter is a perfect vector for this specific pandemic because they're in treating people in nursing homes or in your home, in the public. So it was very important for us, for our incident management team, to really push the importance of PPE, adherence to the best practices that of the plan that the Fire Operations Center put out to all the employees. And then it was available on a portal so that in the morning you could check and see how many people were impacted, where are the cluster facilities, and we did all that with GIS and made it real time so that we could see the changing dynamic across the community and essentially from heat maps where our biggest challenges were. We did implement a 24-hour point of contact. So there was always one of our members with a phone, file cabinet, and a list of check sheets that we followed up with every one of our employees. That point of contact was contacted from people outside the organization, family members primarily, with questions, requests for doctor's visits, appointments. They handled all that. We took care of our people completely. Much like you mentioned, we didn't use any employee sick time. It was all coded to COVID time and covered under workers' comp. So we did our best to develop the supply chain, provide a 24/7 contact for the department, people that need help. And then, finally for us, and this turned out to be a really good thing, is, with an incident management team, you get a finance section chief. The finance part to this allowed us to get the majority of our expenses reimbursed through FEMA, as well as about $400,000 for PPE was reimbursed 100% under a grant with Homeland Security. So when it comes down to reimbursement, it's just so important that the details are captured at the time that it actually occurs and the documentation all jive. So we introduced that team to maintain, and that team is still assigned. Right now we're moving into the new phase where we went ahead and vaccinated 2,500 of our first responders with both shots, and that's been closed. We did that a couple of weeks ago. Now we're moving into the support for public and the category 2 folks in the community to start vaccinating them as well. But it's all a collaboration with public health. It's where it starts, and that's where it has to stay. We've got a number of agencies that have resources that want to help, and we're just a part in the cog in that wheel.
So for our employees, making sure that we had the proper personal protective equipment in place to keep our employees safe was step one. And then from there, we outlined protocols and procedures very similar to what you've heard about handling exposures, tracking exposures, managing employees' time that were out. All of those things we had to take care of pretty quick as things were changing on us. I think the most important thing that we did for our employees, though, was continue to serve as a source of information. It was a very dynamic situation where we would get new information and what felt like almost daily sometimes, whether it was coming from local community health, the CDC. So keeping our employees informed of the latest information, any changes in protocols was extremely important because they're out in the field and now they've become that source of information to the public. So it was very important that our firefighters had the exact same information that administration did, because they're having this face-to-face dialogue with our community members who probably are very anxious and have a lot of questions. And if we can provide them some information to calm things down a little bit, that's fantastic. And we're in a situation where the community trusts the fire service immensely, and they depend on us to answer these questions for them in these times. And so to make sure that our staff was armed at all times with the latest information was super important. In terms of our community, we stood up an incident command system March the 12th of last year. We immediately implemented our continuity of operations plan for our city. We had a lot of facilities that went remote. We had a lot of facilities that couldn't go remote. And so we had to ensure that essential services of government, police, fire, public works, those still have to function. Even finance, information technologies groups, those people still had to be in the buildings. They couldn't work remote. So we had to make sure that we had procedures in place, safeguards, so that we could continue to deliver services to the community while not putting our employees at any unnecessary risk. We also were part of a unified command structure where we worked with our local hospital, our university, community health, Gallatin County, a lot of stakeholders in there, because the one thing that we were very cognizant of from day one was we all had to be on the same sheet of music, because the worst thing we could have done for our community was to put out conflicting information from sources. So having unified command early on in that situation where we're all working together, I think helped our community, because they heard a consistent message from whatever face was up on the screen that day. And that goes back to kind of helping that level of calm in our community stay where we needed it to be. That's transitioned over today. We're still, tracking cases. We have exposures continuing in our community, but we're also working on the vaccine side of the house. We're still supplying incident management personnel to run this program. We're supplying our paramedics and EMTs to help administer the vaccine, because this is such a huge undertaking. Again, I think it probably sound repetitive. No one can do this by themselves. This has taken the whole community to come together and bring all your resources to bear to pull this off. So in terms of your attributes of firefighters during COVID, I think empathy has been the biggest one. Like I said, I think a lot of our people who may have been experiencing symptoms thought they had been a close contact, that it brings a level of anxiety that if we can provide them with a source of information, answer their questions in a very calm manner, and bring that level of anxiety down for them, I think that's the best thing we can do for people. And so I think being that source of information, being a very empathetic person in a time when people are very confused and scared, was probably the best thing for our firefighters to do out in the field.
Much of what you've heard here, we've utilized in Grand Junction as well. As far as the community aspect, we did activate our emergency operations center, and we did quite a bit of work in there trying to get ahead of what was going on and better plan for how we were going to interact with the community. And part of that was realizing that this isn't just impacting the people that are at home, but it's severely impacting the businesses within our community. And so the city of Grand Junction took a really cool alternative approach to try to encourage city employees to go out and have lunch at these places that are in downtown, these small businesses. Go patronize those areas and save your receipts, submit them, and the city would reimburse you for having a specific amount of meals, so that we were trying to help stimulate the economy. So that was one really outside the box innovative thinking that our city manager came up with that was really impressive when we talk about the COVID response. And obviously, like you heard here, we activated our continuity of operations plan. I think just about every city had that going in the ICS structure, the intake command structure, to figure out how to deal with this. I do want to touch on a few things that were a little different on our approach and how we took care of our employees. One of the things that we had set up is we had an agreement already established with 2 hotels in Grand Junction, to where if any of our firefighters were exposed and they didn't want to go home, I would call that hotel, let them know that one of my firefighters is coming, and they knew that that room would be isolated and that they would have measures put in place for how they could get the access card to get into their room. And then we would plan on how to get them meals and take care of them. Knock on wood, we came very close to having to use it, but we didn't actually have to use that system. But we had it in place as an option. Another innovative thing that the city of Grand Junction came up with was offering daycare for city workers who didn't have the option to take their children to daycare anymore because daycares were closing, or even some of their high school, middle school age children or elementary school children are working from home, going to classes online. So they were struggling with some of those pieces. So the city also at that daycare facility also had tutors there, and the city employees could bring their children there and they could work on their schoolwork there and have a tutor helping them. So these were some of the outside the box thinking and measures that came into place when we were dealing with COVID within Grand Junction that were just a little bit different than what we heard from up here. And you heard the key aspect here, collaboration and unity. We work closely with Mesa County Health Department to make sure that the same message was being communicated to everybody. And the big struggle that we had with our firefighters is, and I think we can all relate to this one, is the constant messages that were changing from the CDC about what we need to do pertaining to COVID. And I get it. That was frustrating as heck to our firefighters, but we had to keep sending out the appropriate information so they were always up to date on what was required. So those were some of the really the innovative things that I think that we utilized there. Currently in Grand Junction, one of the benchmarks we looked at was the positivity rate being less than 5% in 2 weeks. That was kind of a mark that we looked at to show that, things are getting better, and we've been below that for quite a bit. So that's pretty encouraging. So I think that it's a sigh of relief for everybody. I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. As far as the important attributes during the COVID response, from the community perspective, I think the most important thing that the firefighters could have is compassion. And what I mean by that is we have members of our community who haven't seen their loved ones for over a year because of the whole safety issue. And they're worried about making their grandparents or their parents sick or spreading the COVID to somebody who has a compromised immune system. As responders, we are faced with challenging situations, but we have to remember to be compassionate show compassion for what the citizens in our community are going through. Not just the firefighters, we should be showing the compassion to them as well as administration, but the people that we serve, we have to place a heavy focus on.
Thank you. We've got a question that's come in online that I'm going to add here. This one's going to come to you, Chief Schaefer. And it's about, you were talking about compassion and taking care of our firefighters. And one of the questions that we've had tonight is, firefighters are contracting cancer at a higher rate than other emergency responders. What have you implemented inside your firehouses to keep your folks the safest?
That's a great question. And it's a staggering reality for the fire service. It's a lot more broad than I think what we all even understand. I buried John Knight, one of our firefighters, a couple of years ago from a job-related cancer. And it was a second to last line of duty death that we just experienced. So it's a personal issue for me. We went clean cab, meaning we took all of the cancer emitting or cancer causing pieces of equipment out of our cabs 15 years ago, a long time ago. And there were multiple reasons to do that. The one was the self-contained breathing apparatus could never really be deconned. And we realized that a long time ago. We had a number of firefighters that were suffering specific cancers that were related, and they were exactly with riding positions. The correlation was pretty clear. So we took that action a long time ago. And we also have 100% primal vents or a way to capture diesel smoke inside fire stations. Those are two of the leveraged technology parts that we've done and procedural as well within the extreme past 10 years ago. Now over the past probably 5 years, we've moved to decontamination of our firefighters completely. After a structure fire, actually after any fire, they have they have a requirement they must doff and clean their PPE grossly before they return to quarters. Every one of our fire stations has, and that's 16 fire stations plus training center, each has an extractor that we made a priority several years ago to clean the contaminants out of the gear. And then every member has at least 2 sets of personal protective equipment, both on the wildland side and on the structural side, inclusive of helmets. So it's what we do. We can't be successful if we don't protect our people. And I think the more we learn with PFAS and PFAS and even some of our personal protective equipment being connected to cancer itself, Nomex treated, PBI treated materials that we're wearing next to our skin may be the next big problem that we address, because it clearly the chemicals that are on those garments are cancer causing. We recognize that. So it's going to be a really hard conversation to have with the industry over the next couple of years. Those are a couple of things that we've done. We do offer physicals for all of our people on an annual basis. Obviously, if they're on the hazmat team, theirs is specific and mandated federally. The rest of the department all undergo not mandatory, voluntary physicals on an annual basis, and we track cancers internally in the registry.
So we provide just the standard physical for all of our members. It's a requirement for all our members, but then we also offer enhanced screening that our members have the option to take. It's at the expense of the department. We want to make sure that they have access to those because it starts there. We've been fortunate. We've caught some situations early because of these enhanced screenings that we were able to catch and resolve much earlier, which resulted in a better outcome. Policies internally, Chief Schaefer spoke to a lot of those, deconning of equipment after events, ensuring that every member has 2 sets of gear so that if a set of their gear becomes contaminated during their shift, we can remove that from service until it can be properly cleaned. Having all the necessary equipment in all the stations to properly clean our equipment is important. And as we're moving forward, we're designing new stations and new fire trucks as we speak right now. And we're trying to capture these changes in the design of those facilities and those apparatus. So if you look at our current station that's under construction right now, you'll see that there are airlocks at every entry point. There are decon stations within those airlocks. So you should be able to come in that facility and completely clean off before you ever get into the common spaces of these new facilities. Changing the way the stations are laid out, not a lot of porous surfaces anymore. That way we can clean things a lot easier. Making sure that we have a dedicated decon room so that when equipment does need to be cleaned, it's on a completely opposite side of the fire station in a room that, quite honestly, when it's over, can be completely deconned. We're not having to worry about the effects of the cleaning materials and water. So it's really impacted the way we designed our new stations, and it's going to impact the way we design our new fire engines. The industry is getting better. There are plenty of best practices out there. It's up to the departments to follow them. They're not mandates, they're best practices. But I'm proud to say that that's something that we take very serious, and we don't make them optional. I think that's the most important. And then the exhaust capture systems, I think those are great. They honestly serve a twofold purpose. Primarily, it's to keep our members safe, but there is that benefit to the environment that we're not just pumping some of those diesel exhaust fumes out into our environment. So it's a twofold piece there that's really been a nice addition for our organization. So, and then lastly, it's unfortunate that we've had to deal with it, but it's real. Is the support for the members when they go through that situation. It is life altering. It's an impact on them. It's an impact on their family. So making sure that you have a system in place to support that member all the way through that process. And the process doesn't end at the last treatment. There are follow-up visits, there are follow-up exams that require some logistics, whether it's getting to the facility, getting time off from work, and we have a process in place to make sure that those employees are taken care of throughout.
This is, like you've heard, a very, very critical issue that we need to address in our profession. And this is something that I've had a lot of experience with dealing with in Kingman. When I started there, we actually switched to clean cabs. Every single apparatus in the organization, anything that went into the fire went in the back of the truck. And everybody had 2 sets of bunker gear. We had decom buckets, we had decom procedures, pretty much the same of what you've heard here. We did place a higher focus on annual physicals. Instead of doing them every couple of years, we started doing them on an annual basis with advanced blood work to try to catch some of the markers of potential cancer starting early to where we can try to get ahead of that. That's a critical aspect to take there. Another one that we did in Kingman as well is we tracked exposures. So every time the firefighters responded to a structure fire, that was an exposure, so that we could keep a log of that to where if anybody ever tried to challenge the cancer in Arizona, that we would have that record to show that. Fast forward to Grand Junction. We actually, the last 3 engines we bought are clean cab engines, to where all the air packs and everything go into the back of the apparatus, to include special lights in the cab that only go into non-IDLH environment or immediately dangerous to life and health. So that would be lights to use on medical calls, to where in the compartments we had lights that just went into the structure fire. And then all of those items would be decom when they get back to the station. And our bunker gear that we utilize, special bunker gear with special cuffs to try to minimize exposures to carcinogens. That was another innovation that we went through and put into place in Grand Junction, as well as carcinogen reduction hoods. So we're trying to find out what is coming out that's going to help minimize exposure to our personnel. And we're trying to get on board with that as soon as possible, as the science shows us that these items are helpful for us. We don't want to wait and get behind the 8 ball on this. We want to be progressive and be dealing with that immediately. The other aspect in Grand Junction that we're doing is putting vehicle exhaust systems in every single station. And we are looking at the way that our stations are designed. We are currently in the process of getting ready to build 3 more stations. And we're looking at the layout to make sure that the layout is conducive to a healthy work environment for our firefighters. So we have to consider all these items in order to truly make a difference and reduce the cancer occurrences within our profession. And we've all been touched by cancer. Anybody who's been in the fire service for a while has friends and loved ones that have suffered from this. And we have to try to get ahead of this and be better at it.
A lot of the great things that we already discussed, we're doing the clean cabs, vehicle exhausts, keeping them isolated from the fire station. One thing, everyone has 2 sets of gear. We get it washed right away. At all of our fire scenes, we monitor the air. No one's allowed to remove their face piece from breathing clean air until we clear that. And then we make an announcement that it's all clear on mass. That's one big thing that from when all of us first came on, it was okay as soon as the fire was out to start breathing that. We find out a lot of those carcinogens are still in the air. In the same goal, most of these initiatives were driven from our Joint Labor Management Committee for Health and Safety. And that's one thing, a committee that's very robust and always looking at initiatives like this and make sure that we get them out. And also they take part in the education of all of our members, because most people don't like to change some of the things that they've always done, how we've done it, but to make sure that they're cleaning their helmet, that they do send their gear off, and they're following all the practices in the stations. So we rely on that Health and Safety Committee to go out to the stations and engage with the personnel to make sure that message is delivered. And as far as support for your personnel, that's definitely a key one. And I'm sure everyone's the same, but anytime we have a member that is stricken with us, there's a line that people that sign up to take them to their treatments to make sure they have everything needed. And that's one of the great things about the fire service, no matter where you go, that support of your coworkers.
Chief Waldo. What are your strategies to provide appropriate service to a diverse community that includes a variety of nationalities and cultures?
I think it starts with going back to a question that we had earlier tonight, and that's being present in the community to foster those relationships and understand what those needs might be. I've had examples in the past where we were running, we ran a fire alarm, and it was because a religious ceremony within an apartment complex was setting off the fire alarm. We made some accommodations to allow that to continue because we understand how important it was to those people to carry this out. It had to do with the passing of a loved one. And it took some creative thinking. It was not our standard mode of operation, but it was the right thing to do. Another example I can give is, just being present in the community, being engaged. Got invited to light the menorah last year with our Jewish community in Bozeman. And what a fantastic opportunity. Never been involved in anything like that, but just to feel embraced and welcome. And for them to see the face again of the fire department there was fantastic. So it's about being present. It's about understanding other people's needs and trying to be accommodating when possible. I think the other thing is knowing your limitations. Obviously in Bozeman, we don't have a lot of language barriers, but it does trip us up from time to time. And so it's good for us to know ahead of time where our resources are. Again, we're going back to our partnerships, whether that's a translation service that we have in town, whether it's using some of our resources at the university, because we have some tremendously smart people at our university who can help us through some of these situations. It's knowing what your resources are before those situations come up. We've had some professors at our high school before. We needed some translation done because we wanted to make some signs, but we didn't know how to do the translation. They did it for us. So it's using your partnerships when you run up on these, different situations that may not be the norm in your community, and knowing how to leverage them and use them in a respectful manner so that the people who need your services don't feel like it's a weird or awkward situation, but you're just treating them like another member of the community.
I think this is something that's very important, especially within our modern day times. We need to be aware of the diverse background of our community, the ethnicities, the religious beliefs, and try to properly educate ourselves and our staff on how to properly interact with some different cultures, to where something that seems minor to us may be completely offensive to another culture. Something as mere as trying to shake somebody's hand or talking to somebody could be misconstrued, and not that it was intended, but we have to understand the difference in each of the cultures within the community that we serve. And we're very fortunate within Grand Junction to have Colorado Mesa University, which is a very diverse campus, and to have some diverse, culturally ethnic students there to where we can learn from them. And we have to be open to that, to be able to have those discussions and try to understand where they're coming from, to where we don't offend them. And I think that's very important for us. And we need to reach out to not only colleges, if we have them within our communities, but community groups that can help provide that education to us and be open and willing to have that education from them.
Again, as far as the best strategy is direct delivery, be out in the community, be visible. And then also we've been very successful with our recruiters. So in the off time when we're not in a recruitment cycle, he's still engaging all of the populations with the religious facilities, a lot of the minority groups. So he gets those relationships and then he communicates that to the still company so they go out and visit. Similar example, we had a diversity or a culture that had to burn outside. Well, in the city of Rockford, you're not allowed to burn. It's a $150 fine. So him knowing that, we targeted that group ahead of time, said you can, if it's for religious, just have to get a permit. So we don't have a fire company showing up and then there's some type of angst between the fire department and that community, and that proved to be very well. And we helped them through the whole process. And now we know what time of year it is. We proactively reach out to them to make sure that we get that taken care of. And all that's through those relationships and the trust. And it does take time to build that trust, especially with a lot of those segments in your community, because typically, you know, their home country, there wasn't much engagement with law enforcement or fire or EMS, and it takes time to build it. And I think, you know, being out, coming to them and finding out what they need makes a big difference in gaining that trust.
I think one of the benefits that you have here at Poudre Fire Authority is access to data. Really a very good GIS analyst and a good system. So it starts with understanding what's out there. They have a good grasp of who is in our community, what languages do they speak, what are, where are their locations, and then go out and meet them. Not just the fire chief, but empower the people that are out in the field. Take the companies, go to the neighborhood meetings, go to the spiritual celebrations, and ask questions. Chiefs should be providing training on implicit bias. They should bring people from the community in to meet and discuss and have really good conversation with people that are in the community. You know, we use translators. We have a really large Eastern European group, and you know, I go and talk to them in their churches with the translator from one of the hospitals. And you know, we use apps on our phones. We have access to translators. We have a number of social workers that are very multiple lingual. So we have access to all that, but I still think it's very important to engage the community, understand what's out there, engage the community, and then put yourself in a vulnerable position to ask really tough questions. And that's across the spectrum. That can be with our transgender community. That could be with people with different nationalities. That's an art. And I think a lot of times we get so focused on the computer or on the smartphone, we lose that opportunity to engage with human beings. And I look forward to doing that.
Chief Engmiller, I think you're next. And I've got a question from a viewer that's out there right now. And this person says, in times of emergency, people can be scared of people that show up in a big white truck with the lights and the sirens and everything. How will you help kids and groups that are scared of authority?
Well, I think that this is an important aspect that every fire department needs to participate in, and this is the community education piece. And this starts off early in the elementary schools, preschool settings, to where the fire crews should go and help provide education in the community. Go do a fire prevention talk at the school, show off the fire truck, let the kids see it, give them the opportunity to talk to the firefighters, to build the trust in the relationship with them, to where when the time comes, hopefully it never comes to where they have to call us, but when they do, they're going to have an established relationship already and trust that we're coming there and that we're going to help them in their, quite honestly, the worst day of their life potentially. And that's a critical piece that the all fire departments should be placing a focus on, not just one community educator going and doing it, but the kids need to see the truck, see what's coming, and actually interact with the firefighters who are going to respond. And that'll help alleviate some of that anxiety.
Well, the first time a child sees a fire truck should not be an emergency. Again, should be engaged out in the public. And I think that's key, and especially, you know, as far as what the department's able to do. This past summer, before COVID, we had a heat wave of a couple of weeks. We said, you know, what can we do to get kids out and engaged? We created a hydrant sprinkler program. I know water is a very rare commodity here, so I don't know if that would be, but that we'd send one of our fire trucks out. There'd be, you know, 80 to 100 kids, and we just rotated around throughout that week, and we posted out. And the biggest thing, the firefighters loved it, and they got upset because they didn't get to do it more, because they got to talk with all the family members, and it was just, you know, just a nice time. All of our stations are open to the public. We advertise that on a regular basis through social media, through all the community groups. that bring your family member in anytime. All of us enjoy doing community tours or just one family to give them the opportunity. And again, that's a potential to have a positive impact on somebody that could be a future PFA member. Just by, you talked to a lot of members, they remember one time just going to the station where someone was nice to them, showed them around, and they went on a call, and that made an impactful memory in them and a positive one. I think that's goes what, you know, the common thread here is that you want to be out in the public, not just the fire chief, but for all the stations. They are owned by the community and they're open to the community for them to come in. You know, Fire Prevention Week isn't the only week that we should be opening them up. It should be open all year long. That people feel that they can come out and visit and stop and say hi and just know who's there protecting their families and loved ones. So I think that's just some of the things that you can do, and you know, a lot of different initiatives. Again, collaborating with organizations throughout, you know, piggyback with some of the efforts they do. We partner with all the hospitals when they have special events going on, that we open up our fire station, trick or treating, just many other things that we do that you can take advantage of, really get that out and get kids and even adults to come through just to find out what we do and what services we provide.
Yeah, I do appreciate that question because I think there's always areas for improvement. And I like to comment that the first time a child sees the fire department or the fire authority, it shouldn't be in a crisis situation. It should really be in a learning situation. So we have a community risk reduction group and a specialist that is their job to organize a system and to evaluate our efforts there. So we make sure that all the kids in the elementary schools, and it's a huge undertaking, have that expectation or have that experience. I mean, then one of the other things we do, we're realizing more and more, we talk about mental health so much, but you know, it is a medical condition. I think one of the areas that we've really focused on over the last 2 or 3 years has been autism. So we have a program where we open up our fire stations and allow children that may be on the spectrum at some level to have that quiet one-on-one interaction with a police vehicle, one of our helicopters, and an ambulance. Let them experience it, identify what their triggers are, what they're afraid of, and then with their parents or with their guardians work through that process. And we have a CAD program that identifies those areas and the locations in our community where they live. So it would give the responders a heads up, but they've already had that experience. They already know what to expect, and that saves time and that just decreases the anxiety of the situation so quickly. So aside from the routine thing that everybody expects us to be out, we also connect with a number of community partners across the city, just to use every opportunity that we can to connect with people, with our companies, because our companies are the ones that are in their neighborhoods. They have questions, and it's our job to arm our people in the field to be able to successfully answer those questions.
And so I think probably the most important thing that's been said so far is I hope it's not their first time ever interacting with the fire department. You know, we should be taking every opportunity, and it's easy to point out the scheduled events, whether it's, you know, we do trick or treating at our fire stations today. The doors go up, the kids come in. It's great. We do a thing at Christmas. There's all the other public events where we get out, we visit the schools. Those are all great. A simple interaction at the grocery store can be just as impactful. We're always on, right? So anytime, you know, whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, that you have that opportunity to connect with the community, it's our duty to take that. But that said, if we've come to this situation where we have a child this is their first interaction, it's our duty to try to explain to them what is going on and answer their questions. We may not be able to do that immediately because obviously we have a task at hand, but there will come a point, whether it's the emergency is over, additional staff have arrived. It's important that we leave a positive impression on this child, because if we don't, that is now their new norm of us as an organization. So I think taking the time, if we find ourselves in those situations, to Just sit down on the curb, sit down on the back of the fire truck, answer some questions, talk to these kids. Let them look through the fire truck if they want. If that helps kind of take that anxiety level down, to build that trust so that if we have future interactions, maybe they see a familiar face. Maybe it's not as foreign to them. But again, it goes back to, I think, what we've all said. I hope we're doing everything possible that it's not their first interaction.
Chief Bergsten, partnerships and relationships are important for every entity. With Colorado State University being in our backyard, there are often opportunities to work together. What ways do you see the university and PFA working together?
I think this is exciting to have a major university like this. Back in Rockford, we partner with Northern Illinois University. Twice a year, their master's program does research topics on items that we present to their class. So we actually have our members come up with ideas, present, so it's good for our members. And then their master's students pick out 2 programs a year that they want to do research on that benefits us because we don't have the time or resources. And it's a great collaboration because then they present to us. So it's a partnership kind of full circle for the whole product. And we've taken that. The one they just did was having a nurse in our 911 center. They went and searched out what were the best practices, best implementation, other areas. So that's just one area as far as with different programs and majors that they have. The other is education, how we can work together as far as tapping in for resources for members to join this organization, their sports teams, and what kind of education they offer to our members to have some type of partnership along with that with tuition reimbursement program or other ways to get creative. One thing that our city just passed this last year was that anybody that lives in the city of Rockford gets a free college education at Northern Illinois University. So it's really trying to raise the bar for our whole community, and that's a community-wide effort. But a lot of those relationships were built off what we did, starting with small incremental. And also safety, working with them on a regular basis, which I know the Fire Prevention Bureau does. But what other ways can we enhance and work with that? And even to get those students engaged in maybe developing some type of responder program for on campus to develop anyone that's interested. Bringing them out to the training academy just to cultivate some of that interest and find out what areas that you can work together to make some big improvements overall for the whole community, because they are definitely a large stakeholder in Fort Collins and the Poudre Fire Authority district. And it's great to have them located centrally and then see what type of resources you can work together just to improve on.
Yeah, currently I enjoy a great partnership with Gonzaga University. It is within our jurisdiction. We staff an EOC on campus during major events. We train their security officers for Stop the Bleed and Narcan administration. We provide them with Narcan and the equipment because they're tied into our system. We really brought them with some change in leadership there to the table to recognize the benefit of kind of like what we talked about earlier, stopping the clock. So they're a part of us. We're a part of them. They're tied into our CAD. They're dispatched to our calls on their campus property, even not in just the in our downtown campus, but some of their property that they own around the community. And they're able to, I think the worst case scenario for us on campus has been the threat of an active shooter. So right now, everything in our response complements structured around making sure that we can communicate with them and they can communicate with us so that we don't have disparate communication systems on the push to talk sides. We've married those together with a crossband device and placed that in their dispatch center. We've put our CAD in their dispatch center. And from the training standpoint, the beginning of the year, and actually when they come back, we have a training for all the RAs on fire safety and how to use the system and how to spot challenges for threats. And then from the prevention side, our deputy fire marshals are on property almost probably every day, if not at least every day, working with the emergency management staff on campus and looking for areas to improve or areas of leverage that we can actually work together and increase the level of safety through the partnership.
Well, Chief, you rang the bell for one of our viewers when you mentioned Gonzaga.
I rang the bell.
Yes.
Good for them.
Yes. One of our former employees is a Gonzaga graduate. so.
OGU, yes.
Chief Waldo.
So I think it would be great to bring some of the successes we've had with Montana State University here. I think they'd be a great fit. I think it starts with emergency planning for the events. I mean, these are large gatherings of people in our community. So we want to make sure that we're working with the university, campus police, to make sure we're prepared, we have interoperability. I think supporting events is a big deal. Those events are big economic drivers for any community. So what PFA can do to help the university pull off successful events to where more events want to come back, I think that's a great thing. I think the educational partnerships, as Derek talked about, are fantastic. There's always programs that are looking for some kind of project. We've used students for GIS mapping, all the way to we've used people to develop social media work for us. I think those are great things. I think two things that I really enjoy is we participate in what's called move-in weekend. So all the freshmen and sophomores show up to move into the dorms, and we have a presence. We're just there. We really don't have an assigned detail other than just answer questions, be a friendly face. I think it's a tremendously calming effect for parents who are dropping their kids off and leaving them for the first time to see, okay, I saw the police department, here's the fire department. This is a safe community, this is a safe campus. I'll sleep better tonight, knowing that my freshman's not at home with me anymore. I think that transitions over into what we do. It's called an off-campus living fair. And that's for that first time when kids are debating, I'm ready to move out of the dorm and I want to move off campus. There's a lot of things that we want them to know. We want them to understand things about rental safety. We want to make sure that they understand the services that the fire department provides. And so we're there to answer questions for both the students and the parents if they're still around. Because unfortunately, we see a situation where a lot of college students end up in basements. They end up in a bedroom that's not approved. It's not safe. So we want to be there on the front end before they get tied up in some kind of contractual obligation or rent or lease, to educate them and say, here are the things you need to think about before you get into an off-campus living situation that might be important to you. Again, it's just serving as a resource. And then, I think the RA training, as Brian talked about, is very important. They're typically that first line of defense when situations are going on in the dormitories. And I think that just to take that one step further is participation in the drills. They're required to do fire drills per the fire code. It's a great opportunity for us to be up there. We get to interact with the students. We get to see the building. And we get to foster our relationship with the university. So I've got a list here. I think the university brings a lot to the table and can be a great partner for PFA.
I've been very fortunate with in Grand Junction with our interaction with Colorado Mesa University. There's been a lot of positives that have come out of that partnership with them. We've been part of research that they wanted to do through their sports medicine program to look at physical fitness in firefighters, as well as sleep studies for us. They do occasionally call us and reach out to us and offer some of these to help us to better understand some things that are going on in our organization. And if we didn't have that partnership, we wouldn't be able to do that. So that's an important piece that we have there, as well as we're actually developing a degree program, an associate degree program with the school there. There currently is no associate degree program on the Western Slope for fire science. So we're working to get that established so that our personnel can actually go to school locally and get their degree taken care of. Another tremendous partnership that we have with Colorado Mesa University is building of our training ground, our training center. So they own the property. We have a training tower on it now. And in the future, they're going to be building classrooms at the location to where eventually they will be able to have an advanced fire science program and hands-on, which is phenomenal for that region because a lot of the departments around us used to have to travel quite a ways to get that type of training. Our community risk reduction group does work with the school quite a bit on fire alarms, exercises, making sure that the school's ready to address the coming influx of all the students, RA education. So we do have a really good working relationship with them, to where if we had just ignored it, I think there would be a lot of safety issues on the campus. But we have to have that partnership and realize that there is a lot that a school like, Colorado State can bring to the PFA, or any school within any community. We just have to reach out to them and encourage that innovation and participation. And then another piece that we had were the intern program that we had through Colorado Mesa University, to where we would get interns that would help with GIS, graphic design. I mean, you name it, we got some great ones, social work interns. So it keeps expanding, and we keep getting more and more benefits from the local college just through that partnership.
Well, we're almost at our time, but I've got a couple of questions that have come in online that I'd like to get to, because I think they're good ones. I'm going to guess this is probably from a firefighter, whether it's one of ours or a retired one or some other department. But what tradition in the fire service, and specifically at PFA, do you consider most in need of change? And how would you address that? So, we know that firefighting is rich in traditions, but what is there one that is in need of change, and how would you do that? And I think we are with you, Chief Schaefer.
No, you don't want to start with me. Come on.
Am I, is that right?
I have no idea.
I think it's right. We're
You know
going
what?
with it.
Why don't you
It's
go
right.
with that? Yeah, why
That's
don't you
right.
just go
We're
with
going
it?
with that.
Let me think about that for a second, because that is a good question. I mean, so the way I look at it is that, the traditions that made us who we are, honesty, pride, service, duty, and at times sacrifice, those are traditions that I think are woven into everything that we do and who we are. Those I don't want to get rid of. I think those need to be celebrated, and that is the culture. Ones that I think are challenging is I can talk about the outcome. I mean, the fact that we're 5% female and 95% male. In the community, it's 50-50. That needs to change. That's not necessarily tradition, though. It unfortunately has occurred through a period of time. And I said this earlier. It's 2021. We have got to put that behind us and recognize that humans are equal, and our jobs are celebrating that, taking advantage of that. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle that they can contribute to make the PFA what it is. So I think that would be my answer to that question. And that was good. I wasn't expecting that.
A zinger.
Yeah.
A zinger from the peanut gallery.
Yeah.
Chief Waldo.
I wanted to say, having a willingness to change. We're very reluctant to change, but I'll be more specific. I think we need to be willing to be vulnerable. We need to say that we don't know. Sometimes I think we have such a high level of trust and respect from the community that we just want to fix it. What's the problem? We want to show up and fix it. And sometimes, it's particularly in a fast growing community, and as things are changing, it's going to be okay for us to go, you know what, we don't have the answer. We're going to have to work at that. We're going to have to get better at asking for help. And that goes back to our partners. And it's just, it's one of the great things about the fire service. Here's this tremendous problem, whether it's, a major building or a global pandemic. The fire service is the first people to go, we'll handle it. We'll take care of that. I think that's fine. That's one of our better qualities. But we also need to look at that and go, we'll do it, but we need your help, and we need your help because we can't continue to do it on our own. I think showing a little bit of that vulnerability will help foster some stronger relationships with our community and some of our partners that we're going to need to be successful. So while I wanted to say just having a willingness to change, I'm going to stick with vulnerability. I think it'll make us better, particularly as we talked earlier about cancer and mental health. We're doing better in accepting that we need help with that and that we're not superhuman. We got a long way to go.
Kind of building and adding to some of that. I think I would go ahead and go with the mentality in our profession of this is how we've always done things. That gets us in more trouble than you can imagine. I'm sure that those that are in the fire service have heard this, and I know you guys have heard this, that there's two things firefighters hate: the way things are and change. So how do you even look at that? Well, the reason that's so important is as an example, the way that we're fighting structure fires, the way we're fighting fires in general, it's evolving and changing. There are studies out from National Institute of Science and Technology that says we should be fighting fires in a specific way to make it safer for our firefighters. We should employ different strategies and tactics, and we need to be willing to look at that science and the information that's coming out and make those changes to make our profession much more safer. Instead of being afraid of change, we need to embrace the change and try to make things overall better for our firefighters and increase the likelihood that at the end of the shift, everyone goes home. We don't want anybody to get hurt, and we want to make sure that we're up to date on the most recent technology in our profession and that we're employing it.
I think probably the biggest thing is, like, if you ask a question why, for people to understand that you just want to get some more information, you're not questioning, like who came up with it, but just trying to find out why things are done that way. And if you're not able to articulate an answer, then maybe you should look at why are we doing it this way if I don't have a really good reason. We have many of those things in our organization that, like, why do we do it this way? Well, I have no idea. We've always done it this way, just like he just mentioned. And I think that's where you really focus on, is there a better way to do it? And I think that really ties into the whole accreditation process also, that you look inward at yourself. How can we continuously improve? And that's asking that question why, or traditional responses or traditional way of doing things. It's going to continue to have to evolve. A lot of the questions that we had tonight, it's continuing evolving how we deliver that service, what services those are. And again, it was mentioned again, you don't need a big solution to a big problem. It might just be a small solution, work with many stakeholders to solve a big problem. I think just having that insight to look inward at yourself and question, which your organization does going through the accreditation process and have been successful, I think that's moving in the right direction. I think that's really impactful to not only your organization, but to the community.
All right, this is going to be our last question. This is one that we've actually had a couple of different questions about this online. And so I'm going to try and put them together into one question. And it's about regionalization and collaboration. So what are your thoughts on collaboration and regionalization with neighboring fire districts? What would you think about mergers with other neighboring communities? And I think Chief Waldo, you're first.
So I'll start with regionalization. I think it has its merits. I think it can be a successful model. If you look at today in Bozeman, we're the regional hazmat team. We provide hazmat services for, we can go anywhere in the state, but we're primarily covering that southwest corner of our community. The same thing can be said for things like tech rescue, where it's really hard for every department to fund, train, and maintain this skill set. So whether it's one department is carrying that, or if it's, one department's good at this discipline and the neighboring department's good at this discipline, so that we can all come together and work as one team when we need it. I think regionalization has its merits and can be done very well. Consolidations and mergers. One, I think there has to be a need. What are we trying to solve something? Is there an issue? Are we inefficient? Are we redundant? Can it provide a better service to the community? If the answer to that is yes, then we should explore it. But I'll say that I don't think we should just be merging and consolidating just because. We need to understand, what are we trying to solve? What are our intended outcomes? And then again, I come back to, does it result in a better service for the community? And if the answers to that is yes, then we should explore it.
I completely agree with Chief Wallow's statement. One of the things that I'm very familiar with is regionalization aspect. In Grand Junction, we're the designated emergency response authority for hazardous materials response, as well as we respond to all BLM lands for hazardous materials. And the reason that works out so well is we're able to get additional funding through BLM and through state resources to get the equipment that we need, to where smaller departments may not be able to get that, but we also offer our services to them. So we will go as far as we need to ensure that an appropriate response is provided. What that does is it allows some of your smaller departments, and I'll give an example. We respond to Montrose on the hazmat call. They requested our hazmat team. By us being able to respond and help them out, they're able to take their funding and focus on an area that maybe we're not placing a focus on, to where if we have an incident, they'll come help us out. So it really comes down to helping each other out and not having to foot the bill for all the services. And it's really spreading it out, making it more equitable, if you will. As far as mergers and consolidations go, I agree with Chief Wallow's statement. It has to be beneficial to the community and shouldn't just occur just to occur. If there is an identified need and if the merger doesn't occur, there's going to be a service delivery impact to that community, then it should be seriously considered. And a good example of this is a management contract that we put in place in Kingman Fire with the neighboring jurisdiction, Northern Arizona Consolidated Fire District, to provide management of their organization and then provide training and provide day-to-day operational oversight. So what we're able to do is take that department and get them trained up to a higher level, to where when we respond on large-scale incidents, we were all on the same page and it was a cohesive response, and we're able to mitigate the situation in a more efficient manner. So that was a benefit to not only our two departments, but to both communities, to where it provided a higher level of service to both of us, because we gained something from it and they gained something from it. So it has to be beneficial for everybody.
I think this ties in well with the previous question. What traditions are that we've always done it this way. We've had our own dive, hazmat team, all the specialties, that you work as an entire response community, not just the authority here, but all the surrounding departments. How can you regionalize and improve service delivery? I think that should be the foundation of your question. And if there is a way to improve it, then it's definitely something to explore. With consolidation, that's definitely something that, you should only do if there's a need. And then it really has to have the community involved. You got to have their input. Is it something that they want? Showing them the benefits and the cons of it, and the impacts of their service delivery, and where that service delivery is going to come from. So having their engagement. Some of the things that we've done back home, we have mutual aid agreements and automatic aid agreements throughout the entire state. And those work out well, and we reevaluate those. Same thing as our 911 center. We look at regionalization of that. We've taken over dispatching for several police departments and fire departments just because of what we're able to provide and the level of service. And there's a benefit to them and us. And it's just, you have to evaluate many aspects of it to see if it's worthwhile to do or not, just not for the sake of doing.
Yeah, I wish there was a ditto button that you could hit, but that's a bad thing about being the last on a lot of these. But, I do agree. We need to identify the problem we're trying to solve, right? If there's not a problem that has been identified that we need to solve, then consolidation or regionalization for the sake of doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the devil with these both are in the details. Pragmatic approach, identify the expected outcome, and then really move slow and get as much stakeholder involvement as possible, involve the people in the department, the communities, and keep the service level at the same or better. And that service level, oftentimes when fire chiefs get together and talk about ideas like this, one of the areas that usually gets missed is the support side. So, you'll bring on 48 new firefighters from another agency and talk about culture and talk about operations and throwing ladders, but we forget that that's 48 new FTEs for the organization, onboarding and HR issues and payroll. I mean, it's a very complex decision to make to expand your service area. And I think in the majority of times, with very few limited stories, I think it's been good. There's been successes all over the United States with agencies amalgamating and creating new agencies like the PFA. Just absolutely great to get a single focus, align the personnel and the mission. But it's at some point, if you rush it or you don't involve the community, it can go bad quick. That's my only addition to everything that's been said thus far.
Thank you. We're a little over time, but thank you so much. We're not going to get to all the questions that people were posing. Some of them were duplicates. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I think it made a great, rich discussion with a really wide variety of subjects. I want to note that the video of this will be posted on our Facebook page. I'm looking to help on that question. Yes, our Facebook page. And I imagine other social media outlets wherever you learned about this this evening. We'll post the link to the video in case you came in late and want to catch up and watch some of the earlier parts of the video. We'll also have posted there a brief survey, a little survey monkey that you can provide some comments to the board of directors. They'll be having their interviews tomorrow evening with these same candidates. We'll have them good and worn out by the time they're done tomorrow night. Thank you for being here and spending some time with us. We really appreciate it and look forward to your feedback on the candidates. So thank you, candidates, and we'll let you go back to your hotel and rest up for another busy day tomorrow.